And welcome to First Universalist Church Avenue, Madison. It's not quite summer yet, I don't think. We haven't hit the solstice yet, but it is hot enough that it certainly feels like summer.
2 days.
2 days. Last week was in the 90s. That was unbearable, insufferable. Then we had a couple days in the 70s. That's what summer is supposed to be like. The breeze was blowing. It was in the 70s. I thought, well, finally we're into the real weather. Now they say it's going back into the 90s again this week. So something's going to have to happen. I'm not sure what. Okay.
Is there any rain predicted?
What's that?
Is there any rain predicted?
Rain for the latter part of the week is what I saw in the advanced forecast. I'm more of a look out the window and see what the weather is rather than. My wife looks at her phone and says it'll be raining here in 5 minutes. So sometimes it actually is. That's pretty amazing the way technology does it, but I would still just rather look out the window. Okay. Any announcements? We went to the Garst Museum yesterday. What's that? Garst Museum yesterday. Sorry everybody couldn't attend that was interested in. We may do it again. It's been expanded a lot since I've been there like 4 or 5 years ago. And the exhibits are extremely interesting. Things I did not know about Greenville. One of the early pioneers, the 1900s, was a telescope maker. Made lenses for cameras and telescopes, and actually made the lens and telescope that was shipped to California from Mount Wilson, I think that's the Palomar, on a train car. It was big enough it had to go on a railroad freight car, made in Greenville in like 1905 or 1906. And then of course you've got Annie Oakley, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Didn't know before that about Dave, Annie Oakley's dog, Annie and Frank Butler's dog. I have a picture which I didn't have time to put it on last night, but I'll put it on the website or maybe do a presentation here in the future. Dave would sit like 10 yards or 15 yards away on a stool, and Annie would shoot apples off his head. That is some dog. Point a gun right in his face and shoot an apple off his head, and he just sat there. So I was pretty impressed by that. And there were multiple other displays. Early Greenville, some really interesting displays of that. Let's see. Oh, it's getting hot enough. We can go back to having lemonade as well as coffee. If anybody has an old ice bucket, you know that when they used to have cocktail parties and they put the ice in a bucket. I think I was using like a metal pan last year, and that didn't work so well. So we had an ice bucket. We'll have a pitcher of water, some ice, and lemonade mix. You can make your own pink or yellow, whatever kind you want. Let's see. I don't think there's anybody else have anything. All right. This is Father's Day, so we'll have a mention of that and some music correlated to that. And it is also Juneteenth. So we're going to talk about Juneteenth today. Originally, I planned on doing endangered species, which is what I planned on doing last week, so I said I would do it this week. Now it's going to be next week. Endangered species is in the bag, so whenever I need something, I'll just pull it out. So it's already done. So our prelude is with Mike and Roberta. What a wonderful world.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white. The bright, pleasant day, the dark, sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, "How do you do?" They're really saying, "I love you." I hear babies cry. I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful, wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Thank you very much, and that is much needed. Troubles and turmoil going on in the world is pretty disappointing, pretty discouraging. It's pretty easy to kind of lose hope as you go along, particularly as the news gets, if not worse and worse, at least doesn't seem to get better. So we need to remember it is truly a wonderful world. Our chalice lighting is by Karen Johnson. What if when I light the chalice, you hear an invitation to welcome gratitude for the earth? Here is my list for gratitude for the earth. Seeds that we plant and grow into, sometimes we know not what. Sometimes it turns into a weed, and then the monarch butterflies feed on it. So sometimes weeds are not always bad things. Animals. Animals are our friends, not just dogs and cats, horses, fish. We now have a pet goldfish, which is kind of interesting. You can actually pet a goldfish, which I had found out if you feed them every day, they come to see when you're leaning over the pond, they come to the surface and wait for you. Weather. Sometimes the weather is something we complain about, but the weather, for me, changing is always an inspiration. You couldn't pay me to live in Florida or Arizona, any place where the weather never changes. I guess it does change. It gets hotter, and then it gets hotter, and then it gets hotter, but that's not what I'm looking for. So, with this flame of hope shedding light in your heart, what is your list of things you are grateful for? Okay, our opening hymn is 126 in your hymnal. Come thou, fount of every blessing. gloom and desperation, show the promise of this day. Help us bind ourselves in union. Help our hands tell of our love. My feelings exactly much better put and with music. All right, let's see, Juneteenth. Everybody kind of has an idea of basically Juneteenth, so we'll go on to that. I have to make a little comment about Father's Day. If you can read this, this is a little thing you can give. It's called Absent Father by Obvious Plant. Oh no, where'd he go? And if you notice, it even comes with the pack of cigarettes that he said he was going out to buy when he disappeared from your life as a young child. The reason this was stimulated, I've been seeing the reports from Herschel Walker running for Senate in Georgia. It turns out almost every week he has another child that he didn't realize or he didn't reveal to other people. He has 4 kids by 4 different women. The one woman had to sue him to get child support. And Herschel Walker is on the stump, supported by ex-President Trump, saying and complaining about black fathers abandoning their families and not supporting their families, talking about absent fathers. I don't know what it is. You could almost pick anything that some of these people say, and it's like a mirror turned around backwards. Whatever they complain about, whatever they say that is wrong with the country, it's pretty much exactly what their activities have been in the past. I don't know, and they don't seem to have any shame. If somebody points it out, they just smile and ignore it and go right through it. I have no answer for that. I don't know what has happened to the American psyche that this keeps on going on and building, but it needs an answer, so we'll be looking into that a little bit too. So, Absent Father, dedicated to Herschel Walker. Okay, our children's story will be on Juneteenth.
Some of you may not be aware of this, but America actually has 2 Independence Days. One celebrates America's freedoms from Britain's rule, another holiday, Juneteenth, commemorates the day when the Union General came into Texas and gave an order that actually ended slavery. Now, you may be going to yourself like, wait, didn't the Emancipation Proclamation take care of that? And my answer to you is this. You actually thought the Confederate States obeyed the law. Okay, sure. On January 1st, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln declared all slaves held in Confederate states to be free. But that news never reached the Texas slaves, and there's many theories as to why. Maybe someone literally murdered the messenger that was sent to Texas to inform them. Maybe, in typical Confederate fashion, they withheld some information from the slaves. Some historians believe that since the Civil War wasn't over yet, that the lack of Union Army presence in Texas made it hard for Lincoln's proclamation to be enforced. Nonetheless, it was cotton-picking business as usual in Texas despite the proclamation. Some slave owners in neighboring states moved their slaves to Texas because they thought that the Confederate Army would eventually win the war, and when it was over, they could get their property back. So when Union General Gordon Granger rode into Galveston, Texas with Union soldiers behind him, and he saw all of these slaves, he decided to make an announcement on June 19th, 1865. First off, a proclamation was made from the president to free all these slaves 2.5 years ago. Second off, you are no longer slave owners and slaves, you are employers, and those are your hired workers. Some slaves did get there before Granger could even finish his announcement. Other slaves decided to go and leave the state so that they could repair their families that were torn apart from the slave trade. Others decided to flee up north. And they lived happily ever after, right? No, of course not. By law, there were free men and women. But in reality, they were enslaved by oppression and violence. Black bodies still hung from the branches. Some were even shot for their freedom. But free men and women wanted to celebrate that they were just that, free. They created a holiday that was originally called June the 19th, but then it was kind of squeezed together and now it's Juneteenth. When they wanted to celebrate the first annual Juneteenth, segregation laws forbade them from using public spaces. Okay, that's fine. We'll celebrate here with rivers and lakes. They dressed in fanciest clothes so they can combat laws that required them to wear ragged clothing. They ate barbecues, sung spirituals, preached religious sermons. Strawberry soda was the drink of choice, and they also ate a lot of red fruits and desserts like strawberry pie and red velvet cake to commemorate the blood that was spilled during slavery. These rituals still occur in today's Juneteenth celebrations, whether it be parades, cookouts, or 5-day festivals. And since whites didn't want to share their own spaces with blacks, blacks decided that they would raise their own funds for their own celebration sites, such as Emancipation Park in Houston, Texas. So as the former Texas slaves decided to migrate across the country, so did the importance of Juneteenth, which is also known as Emancipation Day or Freedom Day. In 1980, Texas was the first state to declare Juneteenth a state holiday when state offices are not closed but partially staffed. So far, 45 states have recognized the historical significance of Juneteenth. Guess what? Alabama wasn't last this time. Alabama was the 40th state to do so. But it didn't get the same paid state holiday status as Confederate Memorial Day or Robert E. Lee Day. There's also a national campaign to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. Whitewash textbooks didn't, and still don't, mention Juneteenth. Because of that, a lot of people are still finding out about Juneteenth. So whether you found out about Juneteenth decades ago, a few weeks ago, or even just now, don't worry. There'll be plenty of cookouts, parades, and festivals to celebrate the resiliency of the Black community. I'm Star Dedicated with Reckon. If you like what we're doing, please follow ReckonByAL.com on Facebook or Twitter. You can also subscribe to our newsletter by going to AL.com/Reckon. Thanks for watching!
All right. Who knows when Juneteenth became a federal holiday? Last year. Yeah. When we finally got a Democratic president, then all of a sudden Juneteenth became a federal holiday. Kind of why in Alabama, Confederate Day and Robert E. Lee Day are paid vacations for Alabama state workers, but Juneteenth is just a holiday that everybody has to work through. So if you think everything has changed and everything is normal, think again. Okay, joys and concerns.
The other day, I was on the internet and I saw this magnet, MAGA, and I couldn't remember what it meant, what it was. I looked it up and it said, it's Make America Great Again.
It's what?
Make America Great Again.
Okay.
MAGA, M-A-G-A.
Yes.
So, I've been thinking ever since I heard this, which is way before the other day, that when was America never great? I suppose if you go back to right around the Revolutionary War, we weren't separate from England yet. We declared our freedom, but we had to fight for it. So you might be able to argue then, but for 200 years it's been great. I mean, we've got a higher standard of freedom than most countries in the world. We've got a higher standard of living probably than all the countries in the world. It's always been great. What does this Make America Great? So my joy is that it's great. Don't need to make it great again. It's great. It's been great for 200 years. Because 200 years ago, in 1822, that was way after the war to make us free. So it's been great for 200 years, and it's never not been great. So that's my joy. It's great.
All right. And the interesting thing is, in 2016, for the election, that was the running slogan, Make America Great Again. Who remembers what it was in 2020? Make America Great Again, again. Inspired speechwriters came up with a novel twist, Make America Great Again, again. So it didn't work in 2020, and hopefully it won't work in 2024. That's just my personal opinion.
It's political, therefore unexplainable.
Yeah, exactly.
Good point, Ken.
And we're going to talk about politics and the effect it has on people, even admirable people, as we go along. We have our sunflowers. We want to remember Ukraine. 3 months plus. They're basically holding their own, but they're losing I've heard anywhere from 1 to 2 to 300 soldiers every day, which is just a tremendous loss that they are sustaining. And they are staying in the fight because of the support that the United States and other countries around the world have given them as far as weapons and ammunition and support type things. Once again, I don't know what the answer is. Once again, we will complain or we will worry about the fact that one person in one country can cause all this damage all over the world, as we mentioned last week, not just for the civilians being killed in the Ukraine, but the bottling up of the wheat harvest and the sunflower harvest, all the material, all the agricultural materials from the Ukraine, even fertilizer, are being blocked so they cannot be exported. Those materials support life in multiple African nations primarily, and those people have no other source of health. The United States or the UN Health Department has canceled support for, I think it was Sudan, because they don't have the stuff to send. Those people have nothing to eat. This is going to be a tremendous disaster that's going to grow and grow and grow unless some kind of solution is found. Yes?
My brother-in-law, John Johansson, who I think you all know, is having surgery Tuesday, so please keep John in prayers. Tuesday surgery.
John Johansson, Roberta's brother-in-law, is having surgery Tuesday. Lloyd's brother had surgery this week, heart surgery. He's doing well, so thoughts and prayers. Somebody come up with some other thing to say. Thoughts and prayers have been ruined for me. So if somebody has some other way of saying that other than make America great again, please give me a suggestion and we will start using that. Until that time, thoughts and prayers, sincerely and truly thoughts and prayers to those people.
I don't have anything at all with thoughts and prayers. I like that.
I like the idea of thoughts and prayers is true because it covers the secular and the religious. The trouble is and let's throw that in for, there was a shooting, there's been a shooting almost every day, but 3 or 4 more people in an Episcopal church somewhere down south, I can't remember where it was. Some guy came to church, sat in for the potluck supper. They invited him to come up and sit with them rather than sitting at his own table. He refused. He was one of those little strange people that everybody knows is strange and they try to be welcoming to. He pulled out a gun and killed 3 of them. Killed 3 of the people in the church just standing there. And then this guy is a licensed gun dealer. That is how, as I say every week, we are sacrificing our children, and not just our children, sacrificing on the altar of the Second Amendment. And even now, this will be another concern. Congress has been debating, trying to find something acceptable to both sides to pass for gun regulation. I was a little suspicious at the beginning when everybody said, yes, both sides have these things we can agree on. It turns out at the last minute, all the things they said they agree on, they don't really agree on, so it was just something to drag things out and make people think that they were going to do something. Senator Cronin from Texas is the one representing the Republican Party. He was booed at the Texas conservative GOP convention because he wanted to extend background checks to everyone, including gun shows. He was booed for that. And what they're offering is negligible. It's nothing. There's no prohibition of 18-year-olds can still buy AR-15s and the next day go out and do whatever they want. This is crazy town, folks. This is truly crazy that these people are supporting this, and I have no understanding of it. Anything else? Well, I guess I better light a few candles and try not to knock them off. Okay, a couple candles for people who have health problems, a couple candles for world problems, and a couple candles for the problems of the United States, which I think are tied into world problems. We are not the only country suffering from an excess of conservatism. This is going on in Poland, Hungary, Romania, even England is having their own problems with Brexit. People are voting for things, intentionally voting for things which hurt them. I do not understand this at all. I do not understand it. Once again, I fall back on the fact that the human race maybe has some kind of virus that when it becomes too difficult, it kind of infects the body politic and eliminates a large part of it so we can start over again. The trouble with the human race having atomic bombs and overheating is we may not be able to have anything left to start with. Okay, thoughts and prayers for those thoughts and prayers that you've not been able to voice. Anything you hold that you need help with, please let us know. Our message is on Juneteenth. And let me throw this in right at the beginning. Well, I can't because I don't remember the name right now, but I'll go back and get it for you. Juneteenth is June 19th. Federal troops arrived in Galveston in 1865. We heard that. Robert E. Lee had surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse 2 months earlier in Virginia, but slavery remained in effect in Texas because no one was there to enforce it. The Emancipation Proclamation issued by Abraham Lincoln on January 1st, 1863, had established that all enslaved people, and this is the important part, in Confederate states in rebellion against the Union shall then, thenceforward, and forever be free. Only in Confederate states in rebellion. We're going to talk a little bit about Lincoln and his wavering understanding on slavery, which was common at this time, and I think maybe still common right now. In reality, the Emancipation Proclamation did not instantly free any enslaved people. The proclamation only applied to places under Confederate control and not to slave-holding border states or rebel areas already under Union control. As Union troops advanced in the Confederate South, many enslaved people fled behind the Union lines. In Texas, it had continued as the state experienced no large-scale fighting or significant presence of Union troops. Many slave owners from the South moved their slaves to Texas, as the young lady stated, hoping that the South would eventually win the war and they would go back home. After the war came to a close in 1865, General Granger arrived in Galveston and signaled that Texas's 250,000 enslaved people, 250,000 slaves, were freed. But it did not happen overnight. In some cases, enslavers withheld the information until after harvest season. Celebrations broke out among newly freed black people and Juneteenth was born. The following year, 1865, freedmen in Texas organized the first of what became the annual celebration, or Jubilee Day. Anybody know why they called it Jubilee Day? A lot of these people were very avid Bible readers. If you remember your Old Testament, the Jews had a history of Jubilee. It was every, I think, 17 or 7, I don't know the details exactly. All debts were abolished, all slaves, because they had slaves in Palestine and in ancient Israel, were freed. So I'm guessing it was every 17 years, not every 7. But they had a Jubilee year when everything was reset to 0. Abraham Lincoln, okay, and then what we want to remember is Abraham Lincoln was not an abolitionist. He was a politician running for national office. He did believe that slavery was morally wrong, but there was one big problem. It was sanctioned by the highest law in the land, which is the Constitution. The nation's founding fathers, who also struggled with how to address slavery, did not explicitly write the word slavery in the Constitution, but they did include key clauses protecting the institution, including a fugitive slave clause and the 3/5 clause, which is notorious, allowing southern states to count enslaved people for the purposes of representation in the federal government. Every slave was only considered to be 3/5 of a real person. And we talked about that a few weeks ago. In a 3-hour speech in Peoria, Illinois in the fall of 1854, Lincoln presented more clearly than ever his moral, legal, and economic opposition to slavery, and then admitted he didn't know exactly what should be done within the current political system. Lincoln, an honest man, a moral man, said slavery is wrong, but because of all the competing forces, I'm not sure what to do about it. Abolitionists, by contrast, knew exactly what should be done. Slavery should be immediately abolished. freed enslaved people should be incorporated as equal members of society. They didn't care about working within the existing political system or under the Constitution, which they saw as unjustly protecting slavery and enslavers. Leading abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison, I'm sure you've heard of him, called the Constitution, quote, a covenant with death and an agreement with hell, unquote, and went so far as to burn a copy of the Massachusetts rally in 1854. Burned a copy of the Constitution as an instrument of the devil. Though Lincoln saw himself as working alongside the abolitionists on behalf of a common anti-slavery cause, he didn't. Now it's going to play, okay. Let's listen to this music and then I'll continue.
Felt in the days when hope unborn had died, yet with a steady beat have not a weary feet come to the place for which our Father sighed. We have come over the way that the tears has been watered. We have come tread the path of the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our wearies, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far on our way, Thou who hast by Thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray. Bless our feet, straight from the faces of God's humanity. Bless our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget Thee. Shadowed beneath Thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
That is the Black Anthem for Juneteenth. Really well done and very moving. Okay. Lincoln did not believe black people should have the same rights as white people. Lincoln did not believe they should have the same rights. Why? How did Lincoln get elected? He had to appeal to the majority of the population. He was not even sure he was going to get elected. So he was very careful not to offend any more people than he had to offend. But his views changed as he went along, and they also, I guess I would say, changed after he was elected. He felt more secure. But if you remember, there was another election during the Civil War when the Copperheads, or the people who wanted to surrender or basically give the South their freedom and divide the country in two, were very strong, even in the North. Lots of mothers and families did not want to see their sons go off and die in the Civil War. So Lincoln was still trying to be a politician, which in the good sense, the right sense of the word, is someone who values and measures the desires of all the people they serve and try to balance it out. You don't ram through just one side because that's what you believe. Parenthetically reminding me of our last president comparing his speech on January 6th before the Capitol to Martin Luther King's Million Man March, where I gave a dream speech. He actually said, literally said, he had more people than Martin Luther King, and his speech was better than Martin Luther King's. This country is insane. All right. Lincoln argued that the Founding Fathers' phrase, all men are created equal, applied to black and white people alike. This did not mean he thought they should have the same social and political rights. His views became clear during an 1858 series of debates with his opponent in Illinois, who you all know, Stephen Douglas, had accused him of supporting Negro equality. That tar brush painting people, trying to label people, your opponent, with things that everybody would be against. Stephen Douglas accused Lincoln of being for Negro equality, like that was some kind of terrible thing. And for a certain percentage, probably 40% of the population, if things have not changed, they would be. In their fourth debate at Charleston, Illinois, September 18th, 58, Lincoln made his position clear. I will say that I am not, nor have ever been, in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and black races. He went on to say that he opposed black people having the right to vote, to serve on juries, to hold office, and of course, most important, intermarry with whites. He said this as a campaign statement before the election. What he did believe was that, like all men, black men had the right to improve their condition in society and to enjoy the fruits of their labor. In this way, they were equal to whites, and for this reason, slavery was inherently unjust. A narrow economic interpretation. You need to be paid for your labor, and you need to be able to improve your position. Like his views on emancipation, his position on social and political equality would evolve over the course of his presidency. In the last speech of his life, April 11, 1865, he argued for limited black suffrage, saying that any black man who had served the Union in the Civil War should have the right to vote. Any man who fights should be able to vote. You might remember the echo of that when the vote was extended to 18-year-olds in the United States. If you can serve in Vietnam and die, you should be able to vote for the war. For much of his career, Lincoln believed that colonization, the idea that a majority of the African-American population should leave the United States and settle in Africa or Central America, was the best way to confront slavery. Everybody's looking for the easy way out. If the races can't live together, we will buy a country in Africa, Liberia to be exact. We will ship all the slaves there for free and they can start their own country. What a simple and admirable solution. He first advocated colonization in 1852. In 1854, he said his first instinct would be to free all the slaves and send them to Liberia, an African state founded by the United States. A decade later, even as he edited the draft of the Preliminary Emancipation Proclamation in 1862, he hosted a delegation of freed black men and women at the White House in hopes of getting their support on a plan for colonization to Central America. Given the differences, quote unquote, between the two races and the hostile attitudes of white people towards black people, Lincoln argued, it would be better for us both to be separate but equal. You can colonize Central America, or you can go back to Africa. His support of colonization provoked great anger among black leaders and abolitionists who argued that African Americans were as much natives of the country as white people and thus deserved the same rights. After he issued the Preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln never again publicly mentioned colonization, and mention of it in an earlier draft was deleted by the time for the final proclamation was issued in 1863. The Civil War was fundamentally a conflict over slavery, no matter what people want to tell you about states' rights. The way Lincoln saw it, emancipation when it came would have to be gradual, as the most important thing was to prevent Southern rebellion from severing the Union permanently. But as the Civil War entered its second summer, thousands of enslaved people had fled Southern plantations to Union lines, and the federal government did not have a clear policy on how to deal with them. Emancipation, Lincoln saw, would further undermine the Confederacy while providing the Union with a new source of manpower to staff the Army. In 1862, he presented the draft of the Emancipation Proclamation to his cabinet. They urged him to wait until things were going better for the Union on the field of battle, or it might look like the last gasp of a nation on the brink of defeat. Politics, again, is what guides policy. Lincoln agreed and returned to edit the draft over the summer. On September 17th, Antietam gave Lincoln the opportunity he needed. He issued the preliminary proclamation to his cabinet on September 22nd and published this following day. As a cheering crowd gathered outside the White House, he addressed them from a balcony. "I can only trust in God. I have made no mistake. It is now for the country and the world to pass judgment on it." Even at that time, he was not sure about what he was doing, but he had the belief in it, he had the commitment to do it. Since Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation as a military measure, it did not apply to border states like Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri, all of which were loyal to the Union. Missouri, parenthetically, each actually had two competing governments, one loyal and recognized by the Union and one loyal to the Confederacy. Lincoln also exempted selected areas of the Confederacy that had already come under Union control in hopes of gaining the loyalty of the white people in those states. Politics again. In practice then, the Emancipation Proclamation didn't immediately free a single enslaved person, as the only places where it applied were Confederate states where there was no Union control. Despite its limitations, his proclamation marked a turning point in the evolution of Lincoln's views of slavery, as well as a turning point in the Civil War. By war's end, some 200,000 black men would serve in the Union Army and Navy, striking a mortal blow against the institution of slavery and paving the way for its eventual abolition by the 13th Amendment, which there is a movie I would like to show you. We'll probably do that next. We'll get together at the cottage some weekend or weeknight, whatever is convenient, and we'll watch a movie and discuss it. Lincoln is one of those movies that is a very important movie in American history and very well done. All right, now, for a few tidbits, I couldn't pass this up. Lincoln is a kind of an interesting person that we know some of the major points about, but do not know a bunch of other things about, so I'm going to enlighten you a little bit. Lincoln is enshrined in the Wrestling Hall of Fame. Nobody knew that. On April 14th, 1865, oops, missed one. He wasn't quite WWE material, but thanks to his long limbs, his long arms and legs, he was an accomplished wrestler as a young man. Defeated only once in 300 matches. Lincoln reportedly talked a little smack in the ring. According to Carl Sandburg's biography of Lincoln, Honest Abe once challenged an entire crowd of onlookers after dispatching an opponent. "I'm the big buck of this lick. If any of you want to try it, come on and wet your horns." Can you imagine Lincoln saying that? There were no takers. Lincoln's grappling exploits earned him an outstanding American honor in the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. That's something I did not know. Lincoln created the Secret Service hours before his assassination. He signed the legislation, and that evening he was shot at Ford's Theater. But the Secret Service at that time was to deal with widespread currency counterfeiting and only took on the security of the president after two other presidents had been shot. It was not till 1901 that the Secret Service became assigned to protect the Commander-in-Chief. Grave robbers attempted to steal Lincoln's corpse. How many have seen his grave in Springfield? Pretty amazing contraption, and it was pretty much just one little padlock that secured his grave. Counterfeiters attempted to snatch Lincoln's body from his tomb, which was protected by a single padlock. The scheme to hold the corpse in ransom for $200,000 and obtain a release of the gang's counterfeiter from prison. Secret Service agents had infiltrated the gang and were laying in wait to disrupt this operation. Lincoln's body was soon moved to an unmarked grave and eventually encased in the original grave in a steel cage and entombed under 10 feet of concrete, which is what you will see when you go to Lincoln's grave now. It's a massive monument, and I did not realize the actual casket was 10 feet under all the concrete to protect it. John Wilkes Booth, brother. Oh, also, if you ever go to Springfield, the Lincoln Museum there is incredible. They even have a holographic image of Lincoln, kind of like you'd see at Disney World, making a speech, and it's pretty impressive. John Wilkes Booth's brother saved the life of Lincoln's son. This is where we get into these weird coincidences that are so interesting. A few months before John Wilkes Booth assassinated Lincoln, the president's oldest son, Robert Taft Lincoln, stood on a train platform in Jersey City, New Jersey. He was pushed into the tracks by a throng of passengers. A hand reached out and pulled the president's son to safety by the coat collar. Robert Todd Lincoln immediately recognized his rescuer, famous actor Edwin Booth, brother of John Wilkes Booth. In another eerie coincidence, on the day of Edwin Booth's funeral, June 9, 1893, Ford's Theater collapsed, killing 22 people. Lincoln is the only president to obtain a patent. Benjamin Franklin is not the only political leader who demonstrated an inventive mind. After being aboard a steamboat that ran aground on low shoals and had to unload its cargo, Lincoln, who loved tinkering with machines, designed a method for keeping vessels afloat when traversing shallow waters through the use of empty metal air chambers attached to their sides. For his design, Lincoln obtained patent number 6469 in 1849. Lincoln personally test-fired rifles outside the White House. He was a hands-on commander, and in Washington, D.C., it was illegal to fire a weapon in the District of Columbia, unlike now when everybody has the right to own and shoot whatever they want. This was actually during and before the Civil War. Lincoln actually test-fired muskets and repeating rifles on the grassy expanse around the White House, now known as the Ellipse, and the National Mall. He came under fire on a Civil War battlefield. In the beginning of the Civil War, people thought the war was like a public display, an entertainment event. Families used to gather in carriages, go out and have a picnic lunch and watch the battles, which is unbelievable, until they found out how bloody the battles were and how naturally disastrous they were. So anyway, Lincoln was observing one of the battles, and the Confederates started shooting at him, so his general had to tell him to skedaddle out of there. Lincoln didn't move to Illinois until he was 21. I'm sure you knew that. And if you go into Indiana, when you cross Indiana, it'll have the Boyhood Home of Lincoln on their signs. And where in Indiana? Lincoln, Indiana is the name of the town he was at. It's west of Louisville, which is basically south of Bloomington, more toward the central part of the state. They have a really interesting museum there and a lot of interesting activities, according to the website. I've not been there in person. He was born in a Kentucky log cabin in 1809. In 1816, his father moved the family across the Ohio River to a 160-acre plot in southern Indiana. He did not migrate to Illinois until 1830. And 160 acres was a big farm in those days. 80 acres was considered on a national plot, and to own 160 meant his father had to have been fairly prosperous. Poisoned milk killed Lincoln's mother. This picture is poisonous white snake root. When Lincoln was 9 years old in 1818, his mother died of a mysterious milk sickness that swept across southern Indiana. It was later learned that this strange disease was due to drinking tainted milk from a cow that had ingested poisonous white snake root. When forage was short or pastures were spare, cows and horses would eat whatever was available. The snake root, which is the flower of the snake root plant, has a toxin in it that is taken through the bloodstream of the cow or the horse and secreted into milk. If you drink the milk, you can suffer the same consequences as the animal that eats the plant, which is basically heart palpitations and difficulty breathing. And if you have enough of the toxin in your system, you can actually die. I'm not sure they were that advanced in the 1800s to know that that's what killed her, but that's what they're ascribing it to. And obviously the animals were sick and other people that drank the milk were sick, and some died and some didn't. All right, Lincoln never slept in the Lincoln bedroom. That's interesting. And he was the 16th president and used the current Lincoln bedroom as his personal office. It was there he met with cabinet members and signed documents, including the Emancipation Proclamation. Now for the actual fun ones, how many people have heard the comparison with Kennedy's assassination or the Kennedy family? Here's a whole bunch of weird coincidences. Both presidents were shot in the back of the head on the Friday before a major holiday while seated beside their wives, neither of whom were injured. Both were in the presence of another couple. In each case, that man was also wounded by the assassin. After both assassinations, there were loud and insistent claims that the fatal shot must have come from a different direction, the grassy knoll. Each president in his 30s married a socially prominent 24-year-old girl who spoke French fluently. Did you know that? While in the White House, each president had a family of 3 children, and both lost a child through death. Both Lincoln and Kennedy were second children. Both had been boat captains. I did not know that about Lincoln. Both were related to a U.S. Senator, Attorney General, and Ambassador to Great Britain, and the Mayor of Boston. Each had been elected to Congress in the year 1847 and 1947, and were vice presidential runners-up in the year 1856 and 1956. Each was elected president in 1860 and 1960. Before each was elected, a sister died. Both had a friend named Billy Graham and knew an Adlai Stevenson. President Kennedy had a secretary named Mrs. Lincoln. President Lincoln had a secretary named John Kennedy. The names Lincoln and Kennedy each contained 7 letters. Both were succeeded by vice presidents named Johnson, Andrew, born in 1808, and Lyndon, born in 1908. Both assassins have 15 letters in their names. Booth shot Lincoln in a theater and fled to a warehouse. Oswald shot Kennedy from a warehouse and fled to a theater. Both assassins were in their turn assassinated by shooters who used a Colt revolver and fired only one fatal shot. There are many more coincidences, but does any of this prove any connection whatsoever between the 2 murders? No, it does not. It just exemplifies the minor mysteries and ironies that surround any great public tragedy. But true believers see gathering unanswered questions as an end in itself, believing that somehow, even though none of these anomalies implies anything, the sheer number they come up with must have some significance. But when you are adding zeros, it doesn't matter how many you add, you still come up with 0. You can add as many zeros as you want, and the total is still 0. All right. So, comments, questions? I found this extraordinarily interesting, and I hope you did too.
Tim, I would just mention, I find it interesting, you brought up several points, political points of Lincoln's administration and his views and attitudes, also his actions toward emancipation, rights of blacks, what have you. And obviously historians study this all the time. But if you look at that situation, I don't know, my mind is turning and looking at Roe versus Wade, and at this time, rather than executive branch, Supreme Court, the judicial branch, creating a major, probably soon to be potential crisis. Where's the element of leadership, and what's the common denominator? We can say politics prevented Lincoln from doing certain things, and it counters what our perception is way back then. But then look at what's the element of leadership and what will come forth in this coming situation, an equally very difficult situation for the country. I find that interesting. I'm going to give this some thoughts. Thanks for letting me share that.
Yes, and please come up and take 20 minutes to share a more expanded version if you come up with one.
Because the historians would say, you know, he's constrained by various political factors in the 1860s.
And that is,
and our current president will be constrained by various political factors, but the common denominator there, if you will, there are lots, and those remain to be determined legally, but also socially and politically.
and that is the hallmark of democracy. You don't impose your ideas. You don't impose your solutions for problems. You try to educate the population to agree in a majority to support these. That's what a politician is supposed to do. He's supposed to appeal to both sides. He's supposed to educate and bring people along. That's what leadership means.
Yes.
It doesn't mean just declaring what you want and then saying the other people are all wrong and hell with them.
Or it's fake news.
Yes, or fake news or whatever, zero added on to zero added on to zero, which gives you a total of more zeros. But some people believe in zeros for some reason. So the president has immense power, but he does not have the power to run the country like a dictator, or he hasn't in the past, and we'll hope he doesn't in the future. All right. Offering. Faith of our fathers will hear. Once again, if you need something, please take it. If you can contribute to supporting the church, please do that. Slide up with the doxology. We're going to do that the first thing every week instead of waiting until I remember it. Our closing hymn is 159. This is my song. We're going to do something a little different today. A lot of times we do the chime at the beginning to center ourselves for worship. Today I want to do the chime, and I want you to take a moment to think about what we heard today, and primarily and more importantly, think about where your week is going and what you can do to make this little village, to make this county, to make this state, to make this nation, to make this world a better place. Go forth in simplicity, find and walk the path that leads to compassion and wisdom, that leads to happiness, peace, and ease. Welcome the stranger and open your heart to a world in need of healing. Be courageous before the forces of hate. Hold and embody a vision of the common good that serves the needs of all the people. Time for the postlude. Wonderful guy. Very nice. Father's Day, don't forget, hope your barbecue goes well. I couldn't find anything on the discount counter, so I made cinnamon rolls. So there's cinnamon rolls and leftovers from last week. So enjoy your Father's Day. That ends our service from the First Universalist of New Madison. Pray for the nation. That's all I can say. All right.
Is your band still hanging in there?